The gunshot that tore through the afternoon silence sent Olivia Rosewood diving behind the water trough, her heart hammering so hard she thought her ribs might crack. She had been in South Pass City, Wyoming for exactly 3 hours, and already someone was shooting up the main street. This was supposed to be her fresh start, her chance to build something of her own after losing everything in the fire that had consumed her father's ranch back in Missouri. Now, crouched in the mud with her carefully packed belongings scattered across the dirt, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake coming west in the spring of 1876. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it had started. Olivia cautiously lifted her head, her auburn hair coming loose from its pins, and saw a tall man in dusty leather chaps walking toward the saloon with his pistol still drawn. He moved with the kind of confidence that came from knowing exactly what he was capable of, his broad shoulders blocking out the sun as he kicked open the swinging doors and disappeared inside. She heard shouting, then silence. Then the man emerged again, holstering his weapon with a fluid motion that spoke of years of practice. "You can come out now, miss," he called without looking in her direction. "Thompson was just drunk and stupid. He will not be firing any more rounds today." Olivia stood slowly, her legs shaking, and brushed the mud from her dark blue traveling dress. It was already stained from the long journey, and now it looked even worse. She had wanted to make a good impression when she arrived at the boarding house where she would be staying until she could find proper work, but that hope was fading fast. She gathered her scattered belongings, stuffing them back into her worn leather satchel, and tried to steady her breathing. The man who had stopped the shooting turned then, and Olivia got her first clear look at him. He was perhaps 25 or 26, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of honey in afternoon light. His dark hair needed cutting, and a few days' worth of stubble shadowed his jaw, but there was something steady in his gaze that made her feel safer than she had since stepping off the stagecoach. He tipped his hat to her, a gesture that seemed almost quaint after the violence of moments before. "Xavier Dalton, madam. Sorry about the welcome to South Pass City. Thompson gets mean when he drinks, and he had been at it since sunrise." His voice was deep and carried a hint of Texas drawl, though softened by years spent elsewhere. "Olivia Rosewood," she managed, forcing her voice to remain steady. "I suppose I should get used to such things if I am going to make a life here." Xavier's expression shifted, something like respect flickering across his features. "You are staying?" "I intend to." Olivia lifted her chin, meeting his gaze directly. She had learned early that showing fear only invited trouble, especially for a woman traveling alone. "I am looking for the boarding house run by Mrs. Chen. I was told it is the most respectable establishment in town." "It is the only boarding house in town," Xavier said, but his tone was not unkind. "Come on, I will walk you there. The streets are not safe for a lady alone, especially not today. The miners just got paid and they are celebrating hard." Olivia wanted to refuse, to prove she could manage on her own, but practicality won out over pride. She nodded and fell into step beside him, acutely aware of the curious stares from people on the wooden sidewalks. South Pass City was smaller than she had expected. A collection of rough buildings clustered around the main street, with tents and shacks spreading up the hillsides where gold miners had staked their claims. The town had seen better days. She had heard that the gold rush of the late 1860s had faded, and many people had moved on to richer strikes elsewhere. But there was still life here, still opportunity for someone willing to work hard. "What brings you to Wyoming territory?" Xavier asked as they walked. His long strides forced Olivia to hurry to keep pace, though he seemed to notice and slowed slightly. "I need work," she said simply. There was no point in elaborate lies or half-truths. My father died last year, and our ranch burned in a grass fire this past winter. I had nothing left in Missouri, so I sold what little remained and bought a ticket west. I heard there might be opportunities here for someone with skills. What kind of skills? I can keep books, read and write well, cook so, handle horses, and I am not afraid of hard work. Olivia ticked off her abilities on her fingers, the same list she had been rehearsing for weeks. I was hoping to find work as a teacher or perhaps helping someone manage their business accounts. Xavier was quiet for a moment, his boots making solid thuds on the wooden planks. The schoolhouse burned down 2 years ago, and the town has not had the money to rebuild it. As for bookkeeping, most folks around here keep their accounts in their heads or not at all, but Mrs. Chen might have some ideas. She knows everyone in town and everything that happens. They turned a corner, and Xavier gestured to a 2-story building that looked more substantial than most of the structures around it. It had real glass windows and a painted sign that read Chen's Boarding House and Restaurant in neat letters. Smoke rose from the chimney, and Olivia caught the scent of something savory cooking. Her stomach growled, reminding her she had not eaten since dawn. "This is it," Xavier said, stopping at the bottom of the steps. "Mrs. Chen is fair, and her rates are reasonable. Tell her I sent you, and she might give you a better price on your first week." "Thank you, Mr. Dalton." Olivia extended her hand automatically, a gesture her father had taught her when dealing with business associates. Xavier looked at her hand for a moment, then took it. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip firm but careful, as though he was aware of his own strength and did not want to hurt her. When he released her hand, Olivia found herself oddly reluctant to go inside. This stranger had shown her more kindness in 10 minutes than she had encountered in her entire journey from Missouri, and she felt a sudden pang of loneliness at the thought of watching him walk away. But she squared her shoulders and climbed the steps, pushing open the door to find a clean, well-lit interior that smelled of cooking and lye soap. A small woman with black hair streaked with silver looked up from behind a counter. Her face was weathered but kind, with sharp eyes that seemed to see everything at once. "You must be Miss Rosewood," she said in accented English. "I received your letter 3 weeks ago. I have been expecting you. Mrs. Chen." Olivia set down her satchel, relief flooding through her. At least this part of her plan was still intact. "Yes, I am Olivia Rosewood. I am grateful you held the room for me." "I do not rent to troublemakers or drunks," Mrs. Chen said, coming around the counter to size Olivia up properly. "You look respectable enough. The room is $2 a week, meals included. Breakfast is at 6, dinner at 6 in the evening. No men above the ground floor, no drinking, no fighting. If you break the rules, you leave. Understood? Understood." Olivia pulled out her small purse and counted out $4. "I would like to pay for 2 weeks in advance, if that is acceptable." Mrs. Chen's expression softened slightly. "Smart girl. Come, I will show you the room. It is small, but it is clean and the roof does not leak." The room was indeed small, barely large enough for a narrow bed, a washstand, and a trunk at the foot of the bed. But the window looked out over the street, the linens were clean, and Olivia could see that Mrs. Chen took pride in her establishment. It was more than adequate, and after weeks of uncertain travel, the prospect of a real bed and a door that locked made Olivia want to cry with relief. "Thank you," she said quietly. "This will do very well." "You are looking for work?" Mrs. Chen asked, leaning against the door frame. "Yes." "Anything respectable that pays honestly." Mrs. Chen studied her for a long moment. "Come downstairs when you have freshened up. We will talk about possibilities. South Pass City is not rich, but there are always opportunities for someone willing to look." Over the next few days, Olivia learned the rhythms of the town. South Pass City had been founded during the gold rush of 1867, and though the easy gold was long gone, there were still miners working claims in the surrounding hills. The town also served as a supply point for ranchers and travelers heading further west, which meant there was a steady if modest flow of commerce. Mrs. Chen's restaurant was one of the few places that served decent food, and Olivia quickly found herself helping in the kitchen during the busy dinner hours in exchange for a reduction in her rent. She saw Xavier Dalton several times during that first week. He seemed to be everywhere in town, breaking up fights, helping load supplies onto wagons, working with a crew to repair the roof of the general store after a windstorm. She learned from Mrs. Chen that Xavier owned a ranch about 5 miles outside of town, a modest operation where he raised horses and cattle. He came into town regularly to help maintain order, though he was not officially the sheriff. That position had been vacant since the previous sheriff had been killed in a shootout the year before. "Xavier is a good man," Mrs. Chen said one evening as they washed dishes together. "His father was a Texas Ranger who moved up here after the war. Taught Xavier everything about ranching and keeping the peace. When the father died 5 years ago, Xavier kept the ranch going. He could have sold out and moved somewhere easier, but he stayed. This town needs men like him." Olivia filed that information away, trying not to think too much about why she wanted to know more about Xavier Dalton. She had not come to Wyoming to find romance. She had come to survive, to build something stable after months of loss and uncertainty. But she could not deny the flutter in her chest whenever she saw him ride past on his big roan gelding, or the way her breath caught when he tipped his hat to her on the street. 2 weeks after her arrival, Xavier walked into Mrs. Chen's restaurant during the dinner rush. Olivia was carrying a tray loaded with plates of beef stew and fresh bread when she spotted him, and she nearly dropped everything in surprise. He was cleaner than she had seen him before, his hair freshly washed and his face shaved, wearing a shirt that looked like someone had actually ironed it. "Miss Rosewood," he said, removing his hat, "I was hoping I might speak with you after you finish working." Olivia's heart did an odd little skip. "I should be done in about an hour. Is something wrong?" "No, nothing wrong. I have a business proposition I would like to discuss." He glanced around the crowded restaurant. "But it can wait until you have time." Olivia delivered her tray and tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept drifting to what Xavier might want to discuss. A business proposition could mean anything, and she found herself running through possibilities as she served meals and cleared tables. When the dinner rush finally ended and the last customer had left, she hung up her apron and went to find Xavier waiting on the front porch. The evening air was cool, carrying the scent of pine from the surrounding mountains. Spring was advancing toward summer, and the days were growing longer and warmer. Xavier stood with his hands in his pockets, looking out at the quiet street, and turned when he heard her footsteps. "Thank you for waiting, Mr. Dalton." "Xavier, please, Mr. Dalton was my father." He gestured to the steps, and they both sat down, a respectable distance between them. "I will get right to it. I need help at my ranch. My housekeeper left last month to go live with her daughter in California, and I have been trying to manage on my own, but it is not working. The house is a disaster. I am eating nothing but beans and hardtack, and I am behind on all my paperwork because I can barely read my own writing, let alone make sense of accounts." Olivia felt a surge of hope mixed with caution. "You are offering me a job?" "Yes. I need someone who can keep the house running, cook meals, and help me organize the business side of the ranch. Mrs. Chen mentioned you have experience with bookkeeping, and I have seen how hard you work here. I can pay $30 a month plus room and board. The work would be hard, and the ranch is isolated, but you would have your own room and all the food you can eat. $30 a month was more than Olivia had dared hope for, enough to start saving for her own future. But working at a ranch with a single man, even one as respected as Xavier, would raise eyebrows and invite gossip. She had to be practical about this. Would there be anyone else living at the ranch? She asked carefully. Xavier seemed to understand her concern. I have 2 ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse, and my foreman, Marcus, has a cabin on the property with his wife and 3 children. You would not be alone with me if that is what you are worried about. I know what people would say, and I am offering this as honest work, nothing more. I am not worried about you, Olivia said, and realized it was true. Despite knowing Xavier for only 2 weeks, she trusted him in a way she had not trusted anyone in a long time. I am worried about my reputation. A woman has to be careful about such things. I understand. That is why I spoke to Mrs. Chen first, to make sure she would vouch for my character. She said she would, and that if anyone in town starts spreading malicious gossip, she will set them straight. Xavier ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that made him look younger and more uncertain. Look, I am not good at this kind of thing. I am used to dealing with horses and cattle, not negotiating with people. But I need help and you need steady work. Seems like we could help each other. Olivia considered the offer. Working at the ranch would mean leaving the relative safety of the boarding house, but it would also mean better pay and the chance to learn more about running a Western operation. If she ever wanted to own her own land someday, this kind of experience would be invaluable. And if she was honest with herself, the prospect of seeing Xavier every day was not unappealing, even though she knew better than to let her heart lead her head. I would like to see the ranch first, she said finally. If the situation is as you describe, and if I feel comfortable with the arrangement, then yes, I will accept your offer. Xavier's face broke into a genuine smile, the first she had seen from him. It transformed his whole appearance, making him look less like a rough cowboy and more like the kind of man who might read books in the evening or play harmonica by the fire. That is fair. Are you free tomorrow? I could come fetch you after breakfast and bring you back before dark. Tomorrow would be fine. They shook hands on it, and Olivia went to bed that night with her mind spinning. She told herself this was just a practical business arrangement, a way to earn money and gain experience. But as she lay in the narrow bed, listening to the sounds of the town settling down for the night, she could not stop thinking about the way Xavier's eyes had lit up when she agreed to visit the ranch, or the warmth of his hand when they had sealed their agreement. Xavier arrived the next morning driving a sturdy wagon pulled by 2 matched bay horses. Olivia had dressed in her most practical clothing, a simple brown skirt and white blouse with her hair braided and pinned up. She carried a small bag with a few essentials, just in case she decided to stay, though she had not told Mrs. Chen that yet. The ride to the ranch took about 40 minutes, following a rough track that wound through stands of pine and aspen. Xavier kept up a steady stream of conversation, pointing out landmarks and telling her about the area. He seemed more relaxed away from town, his shoulders losing some of their tension as they left the buildings behind. The ranch has been in my family since 1868, he explained as they drove. My father bought the land cheap because everyone thought the gold would last forever and no one was interested in ranching. But he knew the gold would run out eventually, and people would still need beef and horses. He started with just 50 acres and 20 head of cattle. Now we have over 300 acres and about 200 cattle, plus the horses. That is impressive, Olivia said, genuinely interested. Do you sell mostly to local buyers? Some local, but we drive a herd to the railroad in Rawlins every fall. That is where the real money is, getting the cattle to market where they can be shipped east. Xavier glanced at her. Sorry, I am probably boring you with all this ranch talk. Not at all. I grew up on a ranch, remember? I know how much work goes into keeping an operation running. Olivia watched the landscape roll by, so different from Missouri but beautiful in its own way. My father used to say that ranching was not a job, it was a way of life. You had to love it or it would break you. He was right about that. They crested a rise and Xavier pointed ahead. There it is. The Dalton Ranch. Olivia caught her breath. The ranch house sat in a valley surrounded by rolling hills, with a creek running along one side and corrals spreading out behind. The house itself was larger than she had expected, a solid log structure with a wide porch and a stone chimney. Outbuildings dotted the property, including a large barn, a bunkhouse, and several smaller structures. It looked well maintained despite Xavier's complaints about falling behind on work. It is beautiful, she said softly. Xavier looked pleased. My father built most of it himself, with help from friends and neighbors. The house has 4 bedrooms upstairs and a big kitchen and living area downstairs. There is a root cellar and a smokehouse out back, and a good well that never runs dry. As they pulled up to the house, a man emerged from the barn. He was older than Xavier, perhaps in his early 40s, with weathered features and a competent air. Xavier waved to him. That is Marcus, my foreman. Best hand I have ever had. He keeps everything running when I am in town playing peacekeeper. Marcus walked over as they climbed down from the wagon. His eyes took in Olivia with frank curiosity but no disrespect. This the lady you mentioned? Marcus, this is Miss Olivia Rosewood. Olivia, this is Marcus Fletcher. He has been with the ranch since my father's time. Pleasure, miss. Marcus tipped his hat. We surely could use some help around here. Xavier has been trying to do everything himself and it is running him ragged. I am not that bad, Xavier protested. You burned beans last night, Marcus said flatly. Beans? How does a man burn beans? Olivia felt a laugh bubble up despite her nervousness. Xavier had the grace to look embarrassed. I got distracted fixing the door on the chicken coop. The hinge broke, and if I did not fix it right away, we would have lost birds to foxes. He turned to Olivia. Come on, let me show you the house. The interior was indeed a disaster, though Olivia could see the bones of a comfortable home underneath the mess. Dishes were piled in the kitchen. Dust covered most surfaces, and papers were scattered across a large table that seemed to serve as both dining area and office. But the house itself was well built, with good light from the windows and a huge stone fireplace that would keep the place warm in winter. I know it is bad, Xavier said, looking around with a grimace. I have been meaning to clean, but every time I start, something needs doing outside and the house just gets worse. It is not so bad, Olivia said, though that was generous. It just needs organization and regular attention. How many people do you typically have eating meals here? Just me most days. Marcus and his family eat in their cabin, and the hands cook for themselves in the bunkhouse. But sometimes we have everyone here for big meals, especially during branding or when we are getting ready for the cattle drive. Olivia walked through the rooms, making mental notes. The kitchen had good equipment, including a large cast iron stove, plenty of pots and pans, and a dry goods pantry that was currently bare except for some flour and coffee. Upstairs, she found 4 bedrooms as Xavier had promised. One was clearly his, with personal items scattered about. Another was set up as a guest room with a neatly made bed and a small dresser. The other 2 were empty except for dust and cobwebs. That one at the end would be yours if you decide to stay, Xavier said, pointing to the room with the guest bed. It has a good view of the sunrise, and there is a lock on the door if that makes you feel more secure. Olivia tested the door and found it did indeed have a sturdy lock. The room was plain but clean, and the bed looked comfortable. The window looked east toward the mountains, and she could imagine waking up to that view every morning. It was far better than her tiny room at the boarding house. "Let me show you the books," Xavier said, leading her back downstairs to the chaotic table. He pulled out a thick ledger and opened it, revealing pages of cramped handwriting and crossed-out numbers. "I try to keep track of everything, but I am not good at organizing. I know roughly what I have and what I owe, but it is all jumbled." Olivia sat down and began paging through the ledger. It was indeed a mess, but she could see that Xavier was at least attempting to record transactions. With some time and organization, she could straighten this out and set up a proper accounting system. "This is manageable," she said. "It will take some work, but I can create a system that will make sense." "You have been recording the important information, just not in a way that is easy to reference." Xavier looked relieved. "So you will take the job?" Olivia looked around the house again, weighing her options. The work would be demanding, but no harder than what she had been doing at the boarding house. The pay was better, and she would have more independence. Most importantly, she felt safe here in a way she had not felt since leaving Missouri. Xavier Dalton might be rough around the edges, but he was honest and kind, and she trusted him. "Yes," she said, "I will take the job. I will need a few days to give Mrs. Chen proper notice and gather my things, but I can start by the end of the week." The smile that spread across Xavier's face made Olivia's heart skip. "That is wonderful. Thank you, Olivia. You will not regret this." She hoped he was right. Olivia moved to the ranch on a bright Saturday morning. Xavier came to town with the wagon and helped load her few possessions, which did not take long since everything she owned fit into 2 trunks and a carpet bag. Mrs. Chen stood on the porch of the boarding house with her arms crossed, looking stern. "You be careful out there," she said to Olivia. "And you," she turned to Xavier, "you treat her with respect. If I hear otherwise, you will answer to me." "Yes, madam," Xavier said meekly. Coming from a man who regularly faced down armed drunks, his deference to the tiny Chinese woman was almost comical. The first week at the ranch passed in a blur of activity. Olivia threw herself into establishing order, starting with the kitchen. She scrubbed every surface, organized the pantry, and made a list of supplies they needed from town. She tackled the pile of dishes, washed all the linens, and swept and mopped every floor until the house began to look like a proper home again. Xavier stayed out of her way for the most part, working with Marcus and the ranch hands on the endless tasks that came with running a cattle operation. But Olivia saw him watching sometimes, a look of pleased surprise on his face as the house transformed around him. In the evenings, after she had served dinner, they would sit together at the big table and work on the account books. Xavier would describe his various transactions and business dealings, and Olivia would record them in a new ledger system she had created, with clear categories for income, expenses, and inventory. "You have a real gift for this," Xavier said one evening, watching her write neat columns of figures. "I can actually understand what I am looking at now." "It is just a matter of organization," Olivia said, but she felt pleased by the compliment. Anyone could do it with practice. "I could not. Believe me, I tried for years." Xavier leaned back in his chair, rolling his shoulders to work out the stiffness. He had been mending fence all day, and Olivia could see the fatigue in his face. "I can break a horse, deliver a calf, and shoot the eye out of a target at 50 yards, but numbers make my head hurt." "Everyone has different skills. I certainly could not do the things you do." Olivia glanced at him and then quickly away, disconcerted by the warmth in his gaze. They had been circling around each other for a week, always polite, always proper, but Olivia felt the tension building between them. She was acutely aware of Xavier in a way that had nothing to do with their professional relationship, and everything to do with the way his hands looked when he worked with leather, or the low rumble of his laugh when something amused him. "I saw you gentling that new filly this morning," Xavier said. "She was fighting Marcus yesterday, but you had her eating out of your hand within an hour. That is not something just anyone can do." Olivia had indeed spent some time with the young horse, a pretty sorrel filly with white stockings that Xavier had purchased from a traveling horse trader. The filly had been nervous and skittish, but Olivia had worked with her using the techniques her father had taught her, speaking softly and moving slowly until the horse began to trust her. "My father always said horses could sense fear and kindness. If you approach them with patience and respect, they will usually respond." Olivia closed the ledger and stacked the papers neatly. "I miss working with horses. We had some beautiful ones back in Missouri before the fire." "You can work with the horses here whenever you want," Xavier said. "That filly could use someone with your touch. I was planning to train her for riding, but I have not had the time." "I would like that." Olivia stood and began gathering the dishes from dinner. Xavier rose to help her, something he had started doing despite her protests that it was her job. "Let me," he said when she tried to wave him off. "You have been working all day too. The least I can do is help clean up." They worked side by side in the kitchen, falling into an easy rhythm. Olivia washed while Xavier dried and put things away. It felt domestic and comfortable in a way that made Olivia's chest tight. She kept stealing glances at him, noticing small details like the scar on his left hand, or the way his hair fell across his forehead when he leaned forward. She was in dangerous territory, letting herself care for her employer, but she could not seem to stop. "Can I ask you something?" Xavier said as he hung up the dish towel. "Of course. Why did you really come west? You said you needed work after your father died, but you could have found work in Missouri. What made you travel all the way to Wyoming by yourself?" Olivia was quiet for a moment, considering how much to tell him. She had been guarding her story, keeping the painful parts to herself, but something about the quiet evening and Xavier's genuine interest made her want to open up. "There was a man," she said finally, "back in Missouri. His name was Thomas, and he owned the ranch next to ours. After my father died, Thomas started courting me. He was very insistent, and everyone in town thought we would marry, but I did not love him. He was cruel to his animals and his workers, and I saw the way he looked at our land, like he was calculating its value. I realized he did not want me, he wanted my property." Xavier's expression darkened. "What did you do?" "I refused his proposal. He did not take it well. He started spreading rumors about me, saying I was too proud, that I thought I was better than everyone else. Then the fire happened." Olivia's voice dropped. "I never could prove it, but I think Thomas had something to do with it. The fire started in 3 different places at once, and it happened right after I had turned him down for the 3rd time. I lost everything except what I could carry. Thomas offered to buy the land for almost nothing, said he was doing me a favor. I sold it to someone else out of spite and used the money to come here." "I am sorry," Xavier said quietly. "No one should have to go through something like that. I survived. That is what matters." Olivia met his eyes. "I came west because I wanted a place where no one knew me, where I could start fresh and build something on my own terms. I am tired of men trying to control me or use me. I want to make my own way." "I understand that." Xavier hesitated, then said, "For what it is worth, I am glad you came here. You have made a real difference at this ranch in just 1 week, and not just because the house is clean. It feels like a home again, not just a place to sleep between work days." Olivia felt her cheeks warm. "Thank you. That means a great deal to me." They stood there in the kitchen, the lamplight casting soft shadows, and Olivia felt the air between them charged with unspoken words. Xavier took a half step closer, and for a moment she thought he might reach for her. But then they heard voices outside as Marcus and the ranch hands headed to their quarters for the night, and the moment broke. "I should let you get some rest," Xavier said, stepping back. "Tomorrow is going to be busy. We need to move the cattle to the higher pasture before the weather turns." "Good night, Xavier." "Good night, Olivia." She went up to her room but found it hard to sleep. Her mind kept replaying their conversation, and she found herself wondering what might have happened if Marcus had not interrupted them. She was playing a dangerous game, letting herself develop feelings for Xavier. But as she lay in the darkness listening to the creek burble outside her window, she could not bring herself to regret it. The weeks that followed settled into a comfortable pattern. Olivia managed the household with increasing confidence, and Xavier's ranch hands began stopping by the main house more often, drawn by the promise of her cooking and the novelty of having a woman around. She learned their names and stories. Young Billy, barely 18, who was saving money to bring his mother out from Kansas. Tom, a grizzled veteran who had fought in the Civil War and never wanted to talk about it. And Marcus's 3 children, who were delighted to have someone new to pester with questions. Olivia also spent more time working with the horses. The sorrel filly, whom she had named Daisy, was responding beautifully to training. Olivia had her accepting a saddle and bridle, and soon she was ready to try riding. Xavier came to watch one afternoon, leaning against the corral fence with his arms crossed. "She looks good," he called as Olivia rode Daisy in slow circles, getting the filly used to the weight of a rider. "You have done more with her in 3 weeks than I could have done in 3 months. She is a smart horse. She wants to please." Olivia guided Daisy through a figure-8, pleased with how responsive the filly was becoming. "I think she will make an excellent ranch horse." "She is yours if you want her," Xavier said. Olivia brought Daisy to a halt. "What?" The filly. "I want you to have her. Consider it a bonus for all the hard work you have been doing." Xavier's expression was sincere. "You have earned it, and besides, she has bonded with you. It would not be right to separate you now." Olivia felt tears prick at her eyes. She had not owned her own horse since the fire, and she had not realized how much she missed it until this moment. "Xavier, I cannot accept such an expensive gift." "You can, and you will. I am the boss, remember. I make the decisions around here." But he was smiling, taking the sting out of his words. "Thank you," Olivia said softly. "Truly, thank you." She dismounted and led Daisy to the fence. Xavier reached out to stroke the filly's nose, and his hand brushed against Olivia's where she held the reins. Neither of them moved for a moment, the accidental contact sending a jolt through Olivia's body. Xavier's eyes met hers, and she saw her own feelings reflected back at her, a mixture of longing and uncertainty and hope. "Olivia," he began, but whatever he was going to say was interrupted by Billy running up from the barn. "Boss, we have got a problem. One of the cows got herself tangled in wire down by the creek, and she is cut up pretty bad. We need you." Xavier's face shifted immediately from softness to focused concern. "I am coming. Olivia, can you get the medical kit from the barn? I will meet you down there." The moment was lost, but as Olivia hurried to fetch the supplies, she realized something important. She was falling in love with Xavier Dalton, and she was fairly certain he felt the same way. The question was what they were going to do about it. The incident with the injured cow turned serious when they discovered she had lost a significant amount of blood. Xavier and Marcus worked for over an hour treating the wounds and trying to stop the bleeding, while Olivia held the animal's head and spoke soothingly to keep her calm. In the end, they managed to save the cow, but it was a near thing. "Good work today," Xavier told his crew as they cleaned up. "We make a good team." That night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Xavier knocked softly on the kitchen door. Olivia was still awake, kneading bread dough for the next morning. She looked up in surprise. "I saw your light still on," Xavier said. "Mind if I come in?" "Of course not." Olivia dusted flour from her hands and gestured to a chair. "Is something wrong?" "No, I just wanted to talk. We keep getting interrupted during the day, and I feel like there are things we need to discuss." Xavier sat down, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Olivia, I know you came here for honest work and independence. I know you have been hurt before by a man who tried to use you. But I need you to know that what I feel for you has nothing to do with your work at the ranch and everything to do with who you are as a person." Olivia's heart began to race. "Xavier, let me finish, please. I have been trying to ignore this, trying to be professional and respectful, but I am not good at pretending. You are smart and capable and kind, and you make me laugh, and when you walk into a room, everything feels brighter. I am falling in love with you, Olivia, and I needed you to know that, even if you do not feel the same way." Olivia stood frozen for a moment, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. Then she crossed the kitchen and took Xavier's hands in hers. His palms were rough and calloused from years of hard work, and she felt a sudden rush of emotion as she looked down at them. "My hands are rough from work," she apologized, suddenly self-conscious. Her hands bore the marks of her own labor, calloused and reddened from scrubbing and cooking and working with leather reins. Xavier stood and gently lifted her hands to his lips, kissing first one palm and then the other. "They match mine perfectly," he said, his voice rough with emotion. Then he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her properly, a gentle, sweet kiss that made Olivia's knees weak. When they finally broke apart, Olivia was breathless. "I was so afraid to let myself hope," she whispered. "I thought you just saw me as your housekeeper." "Never. You were never just anything to me." Xavier rested his forehead against hers. "From the moment you stood up in the street covered in mud and told me you were staying, I was lost. I just did not know how to tell you without risking what we had." "We are both fools then," Olivia said, laughing through sudden tears. "I have been falling in love with you since that first day, and I kept telling myself it was impossible." They kissed again, longer this time, and Olivia felt all the loneliness and fear of the past year melting away. She had come west looking for independence and safety, but she had found something far better. She had found home. They talked long into the night, sitting at the kitchen table with their hands clasped together, making plans and promises. Xavier wanted to court her properly, he said, wanted to give her time to be sure of her feelings. But Olivia already knew. She had learned the hard way that life was uncertain and love was rare. When you found it, you held on with both hands. Over the following months, their relationship deepened and grew. Xavier courted Olivia with old-fashioned determination, bringing her wildflowers from the meadow and taking her on rides through the mountains on Sunday afternoons. They would pack a lunch and spend hours exploring the countryside, talking about everything and nothing, comfortable in each other's company in a way that felt both new and familiar. The ranch hands quickly figured out what was happening and seemed universally pleased. Marcus told Olivia that he had never seen Xavier so happy, and even gruff old Tom started smiling more often. Mrs. Chen, when she heard the news during one of Olivia's trips to town, nodded with satisfaction. "I knew it," she said. "When Xavier asked about hiring you, I saw the way he looked. I thought, here are two people who need each other. I am glad I was right." Not everyone in town was as accepting. There were a few raised eyebrows and whispered comments about propriety, but Xavier made it clear that anyone who disrespected Olivia would answer to him. Most people quickly learned to keep their opinions to themselves. By late summer, Xavier began talking about marriage. They were sitting by the creek one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, when he brought it up. "I know we have not been courting long," he said, playing with her fingers. "But I am 26 years old, and I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, Olivia. I want to build a future together, raise children if we are blessed with them, grow old watching sunsets like this one." Olivia felt tears slide down her cheeks, but they were happy tears. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will marry you." Xavier pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a ring, a simple gold band with a small diamond that caught the fading light. "It was my mother's," he said. "She died when I was young, but my father kept her ring all these years. He told me to give it to someone worthy when I found her. I think he would have loved you." Olivia let Xavier slide the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as though it had been made for her. "I wish I could have met him. He would have appreciated your strength. He always said the most important quality in a person was the ability to keep going when things got hard. You have that in spades." They were married in September, in a small ceremony at Mrs. Chen's restaurant. The town turned out to celebrate, and even some of the miners who had known Xavier's father came down from their claims to wish them well. Olivia wore a simple white dress that she had sewn herself, with lace at the collar that had belonged to her mother. Xavier wore his best suit and looked so handsome that Olivia's breath caught when she saw him waiting at the makeshift altar. The local minister, a kind man named Reverend Williams who rode a circuit through the territory, performed the ceremony. When he pronounced them husband and wife, Xavier kissed Olivia with such tenderness that several women in the audience dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs. The celebration lasted well into the night, with dancing and food and more laughter than South Pass City had heard in months. As Olivia danced with her new husband under the stars, she thought about how much her life had changed in just 6 months. She had arrived in Wyoming alone and frightened, with nothing but a satchel and a desperate hope for a fresh start. Now she had a home, a purpose, and a love that filled her whole heart. "What are you thinking?" Xavier asked, holding her close as they swayed to the music. "That I am the luckiest woman in Wyoming territory. I am pretty sure I am the lucky one." Xavier kissed her forehead. "I love you, Mrs. Dalton. I love you too." That night, after the guests had finally gone home and the ranch was quiet, Xavier carried Olivia over the threshold of their home. Their home, not just his anymore. They climbed the stairs together, and Olivia felt her nervousness fade away in the warmth of Xavier's embrace. This was right. This was where she was meant to be. The first year of their marriage was not without challenges. That winter proved to be harsh, with heavy snows that isolated the ranch for weeks at a time. They lost some cattle to the cold, and there were days when the work seemed endless and brutal. But facing those challenges together made them stronger. Olivia learned the rhythms of ranch life through all seasons, and Xavier learned to share both the burdens and the decisions with his wife. In the spring, Olivia discovered she was pregnant. Xavier was overjoyed, immediately becoming overprotective and insisting she rest more. Olivia laughed at his worrying but secretly loved his attentiveness. She continued working around the ranch, though she let Marcus and the hands take on more of the heavy tasks. Their son was born in November, during an early snowstorm that nearly prevented the midwife from reaching the ranch in time. It was a difficult birth, and there were moments when Xavier feared he might lose Olivia. But she was strong, just as she had always been, and when the baby's cry finally filled the bedroom, Xavier wept with relief. They named him James, after Xavier's father. He was a healthy baby with his mother's auburn hair and his father's honey-colored eyes. And from the moment he was born, he owned both their hearts completely. "He is perfect," Xavier whispered, holding his son for the first time with the careful reverence of a man who had spent his life handling fragile things with strength. "You are perfect. I cannot believe how blessed I am." Olivia, exhausted but radiant, smiled at her husband and child. "We made him together. He is part of both of us." Watching Xavier with their son over the following months brought Olivia joy she had not known was possible. Xavier was a natural father, patient and gentle, singing silly songs to make James laugh and walking the floor with him at night when he fussed. The ranch hands became honorary uncles, competing to see who could make the baby smile, and Marcus's children adored their new playmate. As James grew into a chubby, happy toddler, Olivia and Xavier began talking about expanding their family. The ranch was doing well. Xavier's careful management and Olivia's bookkeeping had put them on solid financial footing. They had enough saved to hire another ranch hand and were talking about buying more land from a neighbor who wanted to sell. Their daughter arrived 2 years after James, a tiny, fierce girl they named Rose after Olivia's mother. She had Xavier's dark hair and Olivia's determination, and from her first breath, she made it clear she would not be ignored. James was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything, and Olivia had to watch carefully to make sure his toddler enthusiasm did not overwhelm the infant. Life settled into a new normal, busy and chaotic, but filled with love. Olivia often thought about her journey west, about the terrified woman who had cowered behind a water trough her first day in South Pass City. That woman seemed like a stranger now. The Olivia who had been running from heartbreak and loss had been replaced by someone stronger, someone who knew her own worth and had built a life that mattered. The ranch continued to prosper. Xavier's reputation for quality horses spread throughout Wyoming territory and beyond, and they began getting orders from as far away as Denver and Cheyenne. Olivia expanded her bookkeeping to help other ranchers in the area organize their accounts, earning extra money that she saved for the children's future. They talked about James maybe going to university someday, or Rose becoming a teacher if she wanted. South Pass City grew slowly but steadily. The town rebuilt the schoolhouse, and Olivia served on the committee to hire a new teacher. They started a small library in a room above the general store, and Olivia donated books and helped organize it. She became a respected member of the community, known for her intelligence and fair dealing. People who had once whispered about her living alone at Xavier's ranch now came to her for advice. Years passed, marked by the seasons and the steady growth of their family and ranch. James grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved working with the animals. Rose was wild and adventurous, always climbing trees or convincing her brother to explore the creek. When James was 7 and Rose was 5, Olivia gave birth to twin boys, Daniel and Samuel, who were identical in appearance but opposite in temperament. Daniel was quiet and observant, while Samuel was all energy and mischief. Xavier adapted to each new child with the same patient love he had shown James, though he joked that the twins were trying to turn him gray before his time. Olivia watched him with their children and fell in love with him all over again, seeing the gentle strength that had first drawn her to him reflected in the way he taught James to ride or comforted Rose after a nightmare. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Xavier took Olivia on a trip to Cheyenne. It was the first time they had been away from the ranch and children together, and though Olivia missed her babies, She treasured the chance to have Xavier to herself. They stayed in a real hotel, ate in restaurants, and walked through the streets of the territorial capital like two young people courting. "You ever regret it?" Xavier asked one evening as they sat in the hotel restaurant. "Giving up your independence to marry a rancher? You could have built your own business, been your own boss." Olivia reached across the table and took his hand. His palms were still rough and calloused, as were hers, marks of their shared life of work. "I did not give up anything. I chose you, and I chose our life together." "That is not the same as giving up. I have my independence because you have always treated me as an equal partner, not just a wife. We built this together, Xavier. Everything we have, we made as a team." "I still remember the first time I saw you," Xavier said, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "You were covered in mud and scared out of your mind, but you lifted your chin and told me you were staying in South Pass City no matter what. I thought you were the bravest person I had ever met. I was terrified. Courage is not about not being afraid. It is about being afraid and doing it anyway. You have shown me that every day we have been together." Xavier lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it, just as he had that night in the kitchen so many years ago. "I love you, Olivia Dalton. I have loved you from the beginning, and I will love you until my last breath." Olivia felt tears in her eyes. "I love you too, more than I ever thought possible." They returned to the ranch renewed, ready to face whatever challenges came next, and there were challenges. The following winter was brutal, with storms that killed livestock and damaged buildings. James got pneumonia and nearly died, sending Olivia and Xavier into a panic, until the doctor from Cheyenne finally arrived and saved his life. The twins got into everything, once nearly burning down the barn playing with matches they had stolen. But there were triumphs too. Rose started school and immediately became the best reader in her class. James, at 10, could handle a horse as well as many adult cowboys. Daniel showed a talent for drawing, filling page after page with sketches of the ranch and animals. Samuel learned to play harmonica and would sit on the porch in the evenings, filling the air with music. Marcus eventually retired, his joints too stiff for ranch work, but he and his wife stayed on the property in their cabin. Xavier hired Marcus's oldest son to take over as foreman, continuing the connection between the two families. Tom passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 70, and the whole town turned out for his funeral. Billy, no longer young, brought his mother from Kansas and built her a house in South Pass City, where she lived contentedly for many years. The town continued to change around them. The gold was truly gone now, and South Pass City had to find new reasons to exist. It became a supply center for the ranches that dotted the territory, and a stop for travelers heading west. The rough edges smoothed out bit by bit. They got a real sheriff who was not just whoever happened to be available. The saloons became a little less wild. More families moved in, and more women, which changed the character of the place entirely. Olivia and Xavier grew older together, their hair gaining threads of silver, their faces gaining lines from years of laughter and hard work. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger, deepened by shared experiences and mutual respect. They still sat together in the evenings working on the ranch accounts, still took rides through the mountains on Sunday afternoons when they could get away, still kissed like newlyweds when they thought the children were not watching. James, at 18, announced he wanted to go to the university in Laramie to study animal husbandry. Xavier was surprised but proud, and they used the money Olivia had been saving to send him off. Rose, at 16, shocked everyone by declaring she wanted to be a veterinarian, a profession almost unheard of for women. But Olivia and Xavier supported her ambitions, just as they supported the twins when Daniel wanted to go to art school in Denver, and Samuel decided to stay on the ranch and learn the family business. The years continued to pass. James returned from university and started his own ranch north of South Pass City, applying modern techniques he had learned. Rose fought her way into veterinary school despite the resistance of male professors and eventually established a practice that served ranchers throughout the region. Daniel's paintings began selling in galleries in Denver and San Francisco. Samuel became Xavier's right hand, learning everything about running the ranch with the same dedication his father had shown. Olivia and Xavier became grandparents, then grandparents many times over. James married a teacher from Laramie and had 3 children. Rose married another veterinarian and had 2. Samuel married the daughter of a neighboring rancher and had 4. Even Daniel, living in Denver, eventually settled down and had a family. The ranch house that had once been far too large for Xavier alone now seemed almost too small during family gatherings, when children and grandchildren filled every room with noise and laughter. On their 30th anniversary, Xavier took Olivia back to the spot where he had proposed, by the creek where the sunset painted the sky. They were both in their 50s now, their bodies bearing the marks of decades of hard work, but they moved together with the ease of long practice. "Do you remember what I said to you here?" Xavier asked, settling onto the grass with a slight groan. "You said you wanted to spend the rest of your life with me, that you wanted to raise children and grow old watching sunsets." Olivia sat beside him, leaning against his shoulder. "I would say you have kept that promise. We have had a good life, have we not? The best life." Olivia looked out at the ranch spread below them, the buildings and corrals, the cattle grazing in the distance, the mountains rising beyond. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is mine. That all of this is real. It is real because you made it real. You came here with nothing and built this alongside me. Every success we have had, every child we raised, every challenge we overcame, we did it together." Xavier wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "You are the strongest person I know, Olivia. You always have been." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. After all these years, they did not always need words. Sometimes just being together was enough. "My hands are still rough from work," Olivia said softly, looking down at her calloused palms. Xavier took her hands in his and kissed them, just as he had done decades ago in the kitchen. "They match mine perfectly," he said. "They always have." As the sun set on another day, Olivia leaned her head against Xavier's shoulder and thought about the journey that had brought her here. The fire and loss that had driven her west. The terror of arriving alone in a strange town. The moment Xavier had stopped the shooting and walked her to the boarding house, beginning a chain of events that had changed her entire life. She had been looking for safety and independence. She had found love and partnership instead. Or perhaps she had found all of those things, woven together in ways she could never have predicted. Her life with Xavier had not been easy, but it had been real and rich and full of meaning. They had built something together that would outlast them, not just in their children and grandchildren, but in the ranch itself, in the community they had helped shape, in the love they had demonstrated through 3 decades of commitment. The years continued to pass peacefully. Xavier and Olivia gradually handed more responsibility to Samuel, though Xavier still insisted on working with the horses until he was well into his 60s. Olivia continued managing the accounts and helping with the grandchildren, who adored spending time at the ranch learning to ride and helping with chores. They celebrated their 40th anniversary surrounded by their entire family. 4 generations gathered at the ranch for a party that lasted 2 days. There were speeches and toasts, and James presented them with a leather-bound book he had compiled, filled with photographs and stories from their life together. Olivia cried as she paged through it, seeing her life reflected back at her in images and words. "We did good," Xavier whispered to her that night as they lay in bed, exhausted but happy. "We did very good." In their later years, they slowed down but never stopped. Olivia took up painting under Daniel's tutelage and discovered she had a talent for capturing the Wyoming landscape. Xavier finally agreed to hire a full-time foreman to handle the day-to-day operations, though he still walked the property every morning, checking on things with Samuel. They celebrated their 50th anniversary quietly, just the two of them at the creek where Xavier had proposed, and where they had returned so many times over the years. They were both in their 70s now, their bodies marked by age and hard work, but their love remained as constant as the mountains that surrounded them. 50 years, Xavier marveled. Half a century with you and it still does not feel like enough time. We have been blessed, Olivia said. Not everyone gets a love like ours. No, they do not. Xavier pulled her close, and they sat together watching the sunset, as they had done countless times before. Olivia thought about the young woman she had been, arriving in South Pass City with nothing but hope and determination. She thought about Xavier, the cowboy who had walked her to safety and then given her so much more than protection. She thought about the life they had built, stone by stone, day by day, through work and love and unwavering commitment to each other. Her hands were still rough from work, calloused from decades of cooking and cleaning and working with horses. Xavier's hands were the same, marked by years of ranching and hard labor. When they held hands, their palms fit together perfectly, rough against rough, strength against strength. They had built something real and lasting, something that would continue through their children and grandchildren, and beyond. The Dalton Ranch would endure, just as their love had endured, a testament to what two people could create when they faced life as true partners. As the sun finally dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple, Olivia leaned against her husband of 50 years and smiled. She had come to Wyoming looking for a fresh start. She had found a home, a purpose, and a love that had exceeded her wildest dreams. The Wild West had been tamed, at least in part, but the land remained as beautiful and challenging as ever. South Pass City had evolved from a rough mining camp into a real town with schools and churches and families. The Dalton Ranch had grown from a modest operation into one of the most respected ranches in the territory. And through it all, Olivia and Xavier had been there, working side by side, building their legacy one day at a time. They sat by the creek until the stars came out, holding hands and remembering. Then they walked back to the ranch house together, their steps slower than they had once been but no less sure. Inside, the house waited, warm and welcoming, filled with the memories of a lifetime lived fully and loved completely. That night, as they lay in bed with Xavier's arms around her, Olivia thought about everything they had survived and achieved. The challenges that had seemed insurmountable at the time now looked like stepping stones that had brought them to this moment. Every hardship had been worth it. Every sacrifice had been repaid 100-fold in love and family and purpose. "Thank you," she whispered to Xavier in the darkness. "For what?" "For seeing me that first day, for offering me work and a chance, for loving me the way you have, for building this life with me." Xavier pulled her closer. "I should be thanking you. You took a chance on a rough cowboy who did not know how to cook beans without burning them. You made this house a home. You made me better than I ever would have been alone. We made each other better. Yes, yes, we did." they drifted off to sleep in each other's arms just as they had done for 50 years. Outside, the Wyoming wind whispered through the pines, and the creek sang its eternal song. The ranch was quiet except for the sounds of animals settling for the night and the distant call of an owl. Everything was as it should be. The story of Olivia and Xavier Dalton became something of a legend in South Pass City and the surrounding ranches. People told their grandchildren about the woman who had arrived with nothing and built an empire of love and hard work. They talked about the cowboy who had seen past the mud and fear to the strong woman beneath. They spoke of a partnership that had lasted a lifetime, built on respect and trust, and a love that had never wavered. Their children and grandchildren carried on their legacy. The ranch remained in the family, passed down through the generations. Rose's veterinary practice continued, eventually run by her daughter. Daniel's paintings hung in museums, preserving images of the Wild West that was slowly disappearing. James's ranch employed modern techniques that increased productivity while respecting the land. Samuel kept the Dalton Ranch running exactly as his father had taught him, with integrity and hard work. But the true legacy was not in the land or the business or even the grandchildren, though all of those things mattered. The true legacy was the example Olivia and Xavier had set, of two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. They had shown that love did not have to be easy to be real. That partnership meant facing challenges together, and that rough hands could create gentle miracles when they worked in harmony. Years later, long after both Olivia and Xavier had passed peacefully in their 80s, their great-grandchildren would still visit the ranch. They would stand by the creek where Xavier had proposed, where Olivia and Xavier had spent so many evenings watching sunsets. They would tour the house that Olivia had transformed from a bachelor's chaos into a warm family home. They would see the ledgers she had kept, meticulous and organized, a record of decades of careful stewardship, and they would hear the stories. About the gunshot that had sent Olivia diving for cover on her first day in town. About Xavier walking her to the boarding house, the beginning of everything. About the moment in the kitchen when they had finally admitted their feelings, when Xavier had kissed Olivia's work-roughened hands and told her they matched his perfectly. About 50 years of love and partnership, of building something that would last beyond their own lives. The Wild West eventually disappeared, replaced by paved roads and automobiles and electricity. South Pass City survived, a small town with a rich history, preserved in part because people like Olivia and Xavier had chosen to stay and build rather than move on to the next gold rush or opportunity. The landscape remained mostly unchanged, the mountains still rising toward the endless Wyoming sky, the creeks still running cold and clear, and in the cemetery on the hill above town, two headstones stood side by side under a pine tree. Xavier Dalton, 1850–1934. Olivia Rosewood Dalton, 1851–1935. Beloved husband and wife, parents, grandparents, and friends. Their hands were rough from work, but they matched perfectly. It was a fitting epitaph for two people who had spent their lives working together, building together, loving together. They had taken the rough materials of their individual lives and crafted something beautiful and lasting. Their legacy lived on in their descendants, in the ranch that still bore their name, and in the example they had set of what love could be when two people committed to facing life as partners. The story ended as all good stories must, with peace and closure, and the knowledge that the characters had lived fully and loved well. Olivia and Xavier Dalton had found each other in a rough mining town in Wyoming Territory in 1876. They had built a life together that spanned nearly 6 decades, weathering every storm and celebrating every triumph as a team. Their hands had been rough from work, but when clasped together, they had been perfect, capable of creating miracles through combined strength and unwavering love. And so their story concluded, not with an ending but with a legacy that would continue through the generations, a testament to the enduring power of love, partnership, and the courage to build something beautiful in a wild and challenging land. They had lived, they had loved, and they had left the world better than they found it. What more could any story or any life ask for than that?